hour having come upon us. The hour having come upon us. We have two absences. Mr. Lynch, our president, and Ms. Johnson, our vice president. They're both excused. Call the meeting to order. Susquehanna Township Board of Commissioners regular meeting, June 13th, 2019. Please stand for Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First order of business, petitions, complaints, suggestions from citizens. Mr. Mills, yes, sir. You're on the agenda if you'd like, certainly. We generally allow 3 minutes.
Yes, sir.
And just as a reminder, procedurally, this is the opportunity for anybody else who wishes to speak. 3 minutes is the general rule, and this is the opportunity for the public to comment. It's not a really time for debate. It's not that venue. The commissioners have a responsibility to offer comments at the end of the meeting. We actually have that on the agenda. So if you have any thoughts or questions, bring them to the board now, and perhaps some of the members of the board will address them at the end of the meeting. That's all. Thank you. Oh, and we did have an executive session, thank you, to discuss matters allowed under law. Please.
Yes. My name is Mark Mills. I've lived in the township on Paxton Church Road since 1980. I have a 1 acre parcel of land. It's the last house on Paxton Church Road, heading east before Crumbs Mill Road in Lower Paxton Township. I'm here because I've had a long-standing problem with standing water across the street from my home. I think the water seeps under the road, goes across. It's killed off a bunch of trees. And I'm primarily worried that those trees stand in between this ponded water that is a sink for the stormwater to flow into, and the life of my septic system. I handed out, I think everybody has one of these. Yep. This is St. Margaret Mary's. My house is this small house that's across the street from the entrance. I marked this up just a little bit. In other words, you'll see the blue line on the left-hand side. It's dashed. That's the approximate sewer location that serves the facility there. And then you'll see the dashed blue lines to the right of my home. That's showing my septic system, my drain field for the house. And you'll see 5 different red X's, which indicate where trees have died in the last 5 years. Just to run through the handouts quickly, and I'll try to finish up. If you look on the second page, it shows where stormwater runs down the street in an eastward fashion towards Crumbs Mill Road, and it settles in a low area in the middle, which is where I've shown a closed depression, and you'll see the green arrow up above that. Water doesn't continue to keep flowing, it flows backwards, so it lays there, it can't get away, it just sits there, and it sits there and it drains across the street. I feel it's responsible for killing my trees and threatening the livelihood of my septic system. I took 2 extra pages of photographs. The one is my house in the background and the standing water shown in the green grassy area there. The second picture is where the Suez Water Company dug a hole to connect the water line for Stray Winds Farm. When they connected it, there was a depression, and that depression has always been there, and that's where the water stands. The other pictures that I have here, again, you can see this is looking eastward on the last page, where there's standing water. It doesn't continue to flow uphill. It stagnates there. And across the street is January of this year. Over the winter, water laying has created these large holes where the trees had blown down because the roots were saturated, and those holes fill up with water. I looked at them yesterday. They were dry. Today, they're filled with water. So I don't think it's rainfall. I think it's surface water running across there. I've pestered everybody about this. I've talked to my commissioner, I've talked to the manager, the engineer's representative, the public works people, the highway department. Most of them have met me on site and or talked to me more than once. And all of them have treated me very nicely and said that they would get back to me and they'd take care of it or something to that effect. Nothing's been done all the time. This has been a problem. It's been a problem since the church came, and the problem is seeming to be getting worse. I was also in contact with the maintenance guy from St. Margaret Mary's, the excavator for the Suez pipeline, which was a water pipeline, which is Keystone Contractors, and the PPL. All of them make a big point to be sure that they can acknowledge my problem, but they wanted me to be sure that they're not responsible for it. Prior to the church being approved, when this was a farm field, my commissioner and the developer came to my house and met on the front porch, and I think they did with other neighbors, and asked me if I had any concerns. At that time, I had said that I thought it would be good if they're getting sewer. I don't care what happens. If I can get sewer, then I'm going to be able to upgrade my home. But in the absence of sewer, it really makes no sense. So you can tell that. So I met with the commissioner. I met with this developer, who said that basically they would take care of it. Well, nobody take care of it. When I saw that the church was started and I saw that the sewer line was over here, my heart sunk because I realized that sewer is now no longer available to me. So for whatever reason, the township decided not to make that accessible to me, which is part of my problem. The other part is I think that what's happening now is the potential for my drain field to fail because the additional water has flown down there. My house was built in the 60s. It's a substandard septic system. It's not a failing septic system. Although I'm the only one that lives there, I hardly generate any water. But I know, because I do soils work for a living, that failed septic certification is going to happen to that house because the system isn't up to standards. It's so the only real repair for something like that, for me to sell it, would be to connect to the holding tank or to the sewer, or try to move a house with a holding tank on it. I don't have a problem now, but I probably hardly use any water. So the trees, I've lost 5 trees. They're over an area that's 150 feet. You can see on that front sheet where the trees are located. They have all been mature trees. They're like 30 feet, which to me is shocking. Nobody seems to feel that's a big deal, but it's like 5 trees that are 30 feet tall, that are mature, that are dying. Everybody is my friend because when they die, those trees are good for firewood. They've cut 3 oak and 2 hackberry, and every time people have done that, they've indicated that the roots were saturated. They could see in the hole where the trees went over and died, that they were saturated. So my concern is that those things are canaries in the coal mine, and I don't know. I live every day wondering if the next time I flush the toilet, it's the last time, because I know the water's coming over there. The surface water's always been a problem. When I talked to the Suez, when he connected the line, I told him of the depression. He said, well, there's always been a problem here, so it's not my problem. This problem existed before, but in fact, because of that hole laying there, it's gotten wetter, and I'm more and more concerned about how it might be impacting my septic system. So I'm sorry to be here to bring this up. I tried not to. Like I say, I've talked to all those people, and I've talked to everybody once or twice a year. Since the church has been there, I've been on this, and it's been very disheartening because no one's doing anything to fix it. So I'm here to say to the commissioners, what can be done? When's it going to be done? I know if you look on that sheet, there are several different flat areas around the church. I hope that the church doesn't come in here, and I'm not coming to meetings or seeing what the church is doing, but I hope you don't approve more developments on this church. One thing I did forget to say in trying to get to the end quicker was I'm at 2801 Paxton Church Road. I have a septic system. 2800 has a sewer. So that whole complex, it makes no sense to me. But I feel that the township took away my best long-term solution to save the developer money when the opportunity to connect to sewer was taken from me. And at the same time, I feel like that not taking any action is potentially creating to the reduced value of my own home there. So I'm pretty sure I've gone over the 3 minutes. I appreciate your patience with me, but I want to thank you for the opportunity to share this with everybody. I would encourage you to drive by my place. You can do it at any time, or feel free to knock on the door or call if you'd like. When it's raining, you can actually see the water flowing. I would say if you go to page 2, you can see in between the green arrows, there's a watermark there. There's water, you can see where the water lays in the street and where it flows and where it deposits sediment, so it doesn't have to be raining. If you can drive by sometime, take a look at it and see what my concerns are with that. So again, I appreciate everybody giving me the opportunity to address you all and share with you what my thoughts are. And I would hope that at some point somebody would contact me and say, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is when we're going to do it, or this is who you can contact, or this is who will help me to figure out what the problem is there. But again, I thank you for letting me address it. And I'll hope to hear from somebody between now and next meeting if that's possible. So,
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
is there any questions?
No, not at the moment. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, please tell us who you are and where you're from.
Certainly. First of all, I'm Stephen Miner. I live at 3605 Green Street in First Ward. First of all, I'm commenting on the First Ward project. And first, I want to express our gratitude for my neighbors. We do appreciate all the money and the taxes and ratepayer that and all the monies that gone into the project. Really didn't think that I'd be coming here to complain, but my concern is that the project now is finished. But it's not finished. I mean, my first concern is Green Street looks terrible. And I really was expecting that before the contractor would leave that we'd have a top coat put on that street. In talking to Mr. Kratzer and the engineers, I was under the understanding it's now not going to happen. I did talk to Commissioner Rabarchek today. She reached out to me, or I reached out to her. I appreciate that. I understand there may be some additional paving from Suez Water, but we're not going to have the street paved. I understand that, but it still presents another problem because the inlets on our street are too high. I think the engineer or somebody made the assumption that there would be a top coat because the inlets are worthless. And I'm not speaking for everyone, but at least the one at my house is too high. The water just doesn't get to it. I talked to John Cohn. He's at 3612. He expressed the same concern on his side. Also, Earl Brown next to me, I know there's an inlet between Mr. Brown and the Long's house. I believe they would be 3613. Earl's at 3611. But anyway, I just am hoping this is not the end of the project because I really think something needs to be done. I did express to Commissioner Rabarchek today that we had a similar problem when the street was overlaid some years ago. They did put a little channel in, and I talked to Gary Myers at the time. He was very helpful. That might be a cheaper solution, at least keep the water moving. But my concern is that, you've spent a great deal of money, and it just doesn't seem to work. And I think that's a shame because I really want to try to keep the inlets clear, get the drainage out of my neighborhood. And I know you folks invested all this money. I know there's pressure from Chesapeake Bay Foundation and others to keep the drainage clear. Appreciate all that. The inlets look great. They're just too high. So I don't know if that helps you at all. I didn't bring any exhibits as the gentleman before me, but I did send photographs to Mr. Kratzer and the engineer, so I think you probably have them someplace.
Yeah, we received them.
All right. Thank you, folks.
Steve, thanks for coming tonight.
Folks, I can't hear myself. Oh, there we go. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Yes? No? You sure? Come on up. Please tell us your name and where you live.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Vince Williams, and I live at 2504 George Street. I'm a member of the Edgemount Fire Company, and I'm here tonight to address my concerns about the status of the Edgemount Fire Company, the building, and what the township's plans are to move forward with the property and the activities we wish to continue to have there since it's been closed.
Okay.
Yes.
I think
Do we have an update on
someone
that?
can be in touch.
We'll address all these questions at the end. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? No? Okay. Let's see. Next item on the agenda would be the approval of the minutes. First, from May 9th at the regular meeting, 2019.
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any questions? Any content discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Passed. Approval of the minutes for the May 23rd, 2019 workshop meeting. Motion
So moved. Second.
been moved and second. For discussion, is there any question? All in favor?
Aye.
Passed. Do we have, Mr. Manager, any recognitions and presentations?
We do not, Mr. President.
All right, very good, thank you. Reports of committees, buildings and ground, Mr. Rothrock.
Yes, thank you. We are still working on the solar energy project. My understanding is that the agreement has been reviewed by our solicitor and found satisfactory. Is that correct? And also that our engineer has completed their review for the installation of the solar panels and has found that satisfactory and that the cost was reasonable. Is that correct, Mr. Grubik?
That's correct.
Okay. So we're moving forward. At this point, we are waiting, I believe, if I understand the situation, we're waiting for a report from an electrical contractor who looked at our current electric service to see if it was compatible with the proposed solar installation. And so we are hoping to have a final complete proposal ready for board consideration for our June workshop meeting or a meeting in July.
Yep.
That's my report.
Very good, thank you. Item number 2, budget, finance, insurance, and pension. Normally, I would provide a report. I will defer to Mrs. Robarczyk.
I wasn't prepared to give a report.
Any
I
highlights?
defer to Commissioner Fleming.
Well, we did meet recently. Unfortunately, I could not attend, but we met to go over, as I understand, we met to go over the audit.
That is correct.
There are some there's some amendments that need to be made to the audit. We will make those, and we have to then, once we find it satisfactory, we'll have to vote to approve that audit, and it's for 2018 for the record. So, and we do plan, I believe, to have another budget meeting in the next week or so. I'm sorry, next month. I'm sorry, and continue to discuss where we are in the 5-year proposal, budget proposal, and our 5-year outlook. So that work will continue.
Mr. Kratzer, do you have any additional thoughts?
I do not at this time. Nope.
Very good, thank you. Public Works, Mr. Napper.
Yes, Mr. President. The Public Works Department report for the month of May. The Public Works Department patched holes, potholes, repaired inlets, and replaced storm pipes on Laurel Drive. Roadside grass mowing and street sweeping continues throughout the township, and the street sweeping schedule is on the township website. As a reminder, PennDOT announced yesterday, June 12th, that starting Monday, June 24th through November 27th, the southbound Interstate I-81 off-ramp at exit 67A to eastbound US 22, and we have a map that we can add to this, heading towards Cameron Street in the city of Harrisburg will be closed for bridge repair in Susquehanna Township. This ends my report. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Yes, the clerk.
Health and sanitation, do we have any report? Any news?
Yes, we do. We will have yard waste pickup by Penn Waste this Saturday, June 15th, and please have all materials to the curb by 6 a.m. Thank you.
Very good. Administration and personnel, Mr. Napper, any thoughts?
No report,
No
Mr.
news?
President.
No news, this is good news. Mr. Engel, police.
No report.
Mr. Fleming, fire, EMS, EMA.
Yes, Mr. President. Very quickly, just wanted to report that our Engine 32 truck class and rescue academies classes are both halfway through their training, and we look forward to next month providing or presenting some fire and EMS awards for some outstanding work being done by our volunteer fire personnel and our EMS service.
I have a question.
That concludes my report.
Yes.
Yes.
We often talk about police and fire. Is it possible to get any news, any reports from Susquehanna Township EMS? Do they submit monthly reports?
STEMS is we continue a dialogue as part of the Public Safety Committee, but they don't submit. Chief Bailey doesn't submit reports on a regular basis, but I'm sure that's something that, given the support from the township, that if we asked him, I think he'd be amenable to doing that.
Would you be in favor of that?
Yeah.
Would
I
that be
believe he
useful?
does. Excuse
And
me.
does
I'm
he-
sorry. He does.
Yeah, he
reports
does.
to the
Just to
township.
clarify that issue, he does
Okay,
send
I'm
a monthly
sorry.
report through Public Safety Director Martin. So Rob does.
Right. Is that
Okay. Is that enclosed in our packet? Do
No,
I miss
perhaps
it?
we could get it enclosed
Yeah,
in our
right.
packet
Okay.
in
We
the
should
future. Yeah.
we should probably start distributing that.
Apologies.
But
If we
yes,
could apologize.
No,
there
you
is
wouldn't
a
know if you
monthly
didn't get it.
report.
Yeah.
That's why I'm asking if they're submitted, if they have something prepared
Yeah.
and available.
And I know typically on a monthly basis too, Chief Drees will submit the number of calls they had, responses, and we report that out when we get it, and that also makes it into the packet as well. So I think we could include that from EMS. That would be.
Yeah. They also will likely be representatives from STEMS here in an upcoming meeting. They recently were recognized, I think awarded some sort of certification for the level of service that they're providing. So I think they want to come and share that news with the Board of Commissioners as well as the general updates as it relates to STEMS.
I'm glad to hear that because it's often forgotten that they are a private service that just happens to carry the Susquehanna Township name.
Right.
They don't operate as a function of the township per se. And we rely upon them probably 3 or 4 times as often, maybe 10 times as often as we rely upon the fire service. When you call 911, an ambulance always goes one way or the other. So I think it's probably important and a good idea to raise the level of awareness of what kind of service that they provide to the township and to surrounding communities by extension.
Yep.
And just to one other thing, I just thought about it. I believe we received an invitation recently. The commissioners did for a burn demonstration by Progress Fire Company. So we're all invited to that. I believe it's going to be in August.
That is correct, yeah.
So
Will you be representing all of us at that?
So my understanding,
Going in?
oh,
you did previously.
I have done that.
Yeah.
Oh, have you?
Oh yeah, it's when I first started, it was an experience. Got the turnout gear on. I was accompanied by Chief Drees, holding on to him for dear life as he was in front of me in the building. It is incredibly dark and hot. Oh, see, that's out of bounds. My colleague, Commissioner Engel, said, where did they find a helmet big enough for this head? But they did. I don't know where they got it, but they did, for the record. But it was an amazing experience. I would recommend it. I would recommend it.
Yeah.
I would do it again. Sure.
All right, I'll join.
All right. There you go. Sounds good.
I was considering.
Anyone else?
Yeah,
Maybe.
for sure.
You hear that, Chief Drees?
Thrown down
All
the
right.
gauntlet now.
I've already been inside a burning house.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
oh no.
Gonna have to order bigger helmets.
Thank you for those
Keller.
reports. Mrs. Robarchuk, any recreation report?
Thank you. Last night, the RAC Committee, Recreation Advisory Committee, toured some of the parks in the township, one, to familiarize themselves with them for some of the new members, but also they were scouting out potential locations for a midget football practice field. That's our recreation program in the township, recreation football. They currently practice at the middle school. and they're running out of space there. So we were scouting out a location for that, and Mrs. Logan was our driver. She did an excellent job driving the large van. She was the tour guide. Also, the RAC committee the members are volunteering to work with the police department and the school district to help plan National Night Out. Our comprehensive plan discusses building a sense of community in the township, so they thought that was a good way to reach out and work together with other entities in the community. National Night Out is Tuesday, August 6th. And I think the thought is to hold the event at Veterans Park because they can simultaneously celebrate the dedication of the new improvements at Veterans Park too. So
At what park was that again?
Veterans.
Veterans.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that concludes my report. Thank you.
Can I add on that? Because I
please
think
do.
we've all been receiving phone calls
Yeah,
about
please.
the football. And I know one gentleman, Mr. Early, who has reached out to me numerous times, and he couldn't make it yesterday because him and I were going to do the same thing that I didn't realize that the rec board was doing. So I appreciate you doing that, going out with them, because this is a big issue for our kids in our township. And if we can work together with the school district, you know, to find a feel for our kids, that would be interesting.
I'm sorry, I was just speaking with Mr. Engel, and coincidentally, we have these photos in front of us.
Yes.
Well, I know it's private property, but it certainly looks flat and developed, and it's a
Church.
church. It's a charitable institution, and it certainly seems to have land that might suffice. Perhaps there could be some arrangement worked out. There's plenty of parking, plenty of public access.
And the third caveat is lights. Because of the time of year that they practice football, they need lights.
Yeah.
And that's why some of the locations at our township parks were ideal because they
Right.
already have lights
Yeah.
installed.
Okay.
In the fall, you know, you realize it gets dark earlier.
Quickly, it was a good idea while it lasted.
Yeah, no.
Well, and
Maybe if they played in the spring. Yeah.
well, but there are portable systems as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. So.
Right.
My suggestion, if considering it, we don't have all the answers, but certainly we don't even know how large the size of this section of the property is, why not ask them to contact the church and see if the field is even available or even suitable for use? But there may be options here.
Right.
It's another option on the table. We can look into it.
Yeah.
I think we just wanted to do our due diligence and look at the fields within the township
Right.
first, considering that football is the only sport that the township does not provide space for. So that was the first
If
alternative.
there's any way I can help you, it's just you.
Thank you.
Please,
Yeah,
I
we'll
would
come to the
love to help.
next Recreation Advisory Committee meeting. It's
Speaking of recreation, is that something maybe because we don't have the participation of individuals to be on that board, and I'm just speaking out loud, is that something that we can go at large, or do we have to stay within our wards?
No, I mean, there's no obligation for you to have some sort of ward-based, representation. Again, I know that's historically has been the case, but it has been, as I think has been reported in the past, it has been a challenge getting certain members to seemingly attend.
Right. If you can't
and,
make up a quorum, we might as well, if I can get 2 people from my ward,
right.
would that be helpful?
Yes, I mean, as long as, so who has a vacancy?
8,
Commissioner
and I'm
Fleming.
working on it.
So-
You've been working
So
on it for
if,
a while.
I was
I'll
just
help
going
you.
to say, if Commissioner Fleming was amenable to having someone,
got
it
you.
would be,
Wasn't it mentioned at a previous meeting that we can have alternate members of that board that might help with attendance?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I wasn't aware of that, so if I came up with an alternate, that might help.
We've had
Yeah.
alternates in the past.
Yeah.
Yes,
we do have a ward that has an alternate currently. So yes.
Yeah. Any other discussion?
Just one more for recreation. I'll stop because Mr. Williams is sitting here. Could we address his issue? Is that something we want to do with the, I don't want him to be here all night to the end with recreation as far as Edgemount Firehouse.
Oh, we're
I-
almost through. Let's get through the agenda. I think we'll have time to speak to it very
I just
quickly.
don't- I'm just looking out for
Well, and I don't.
Commissioner
I don't
I'm
know
not sure
if
it's a
plans have
recreational.
been finalized.
Yeah, I don't think that, I'm not sure. They've
Well,
been.
then tell him that, and then he could be on his way.
Why? Well,
Okay, let me shut up. Sorry, Mr.
Any-
Williams, I tried, sir.
Any news from planning and zoning?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. There was a planning commission meeting on the 20th of May. There were two items that were considered. First was a capital preservation committee storage facility, which is a 17,200 square foot, very large storage facility for state historical artifacts to be owned by the state on 2.2 acres off of an existing parking lot accessed by Technology Park Drive, which is near the other state administrative buildings on the state hospital grounds. No staff will have offices there, and once the items are transferred, they'll only need to visit the facility a few times a month, so it's going to be a very low traffic situation. It's a conservation zone, but state buildings are permitted. I believe that's correct. The Planning Commission did approve the waiver of preliminary plans and recommended approval of the plan to our Board of Commissioners, subject to that all comments by staff, township engineer, and the Dauphin County Planning Commission have to be met. The second item was a neighborhood design development ordinance amendment presented by Charter Homes for a 23-acre parcel located off Reichert Road for an 80-unit residential neighborhood. So this would be a high-density development. And the proposed amendment would affect all R2, R3, and R4 zones. So this is a pretty big step. So no action was taken by the Planning Commission, and additional information has been received from the developer and will be considered at the next meeting. There were also two zoning hearing board meetings, so the 14th of May and 11th of June. At the May 14th meeting, the zoning hearing board determined that the city had standing to pursue their request, and then the hearing was continued until June 11th. At the June 11th meeting, the city engineer testified at length about the proposed composting facility, and there was questioning by our solicitor and the city solicitor, but no decision was reached, and the hearing was continued until the scheduled July 10th meeting of the zoning hearing board. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Is there there's no action for the board to consider at this moment?
No.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Manager, bids and agreements?
Yes, Mr. President. The first three items, unless the board has an objection, could potentially be taken together. These are we're seeking authorization to sell vehicles that you had previously authorized advertisement of via municipal bid. A 1988 Ford F-250 pickup truck, a 1997 Ford F-250 diesel pickup truck, and a 2008 Ford F-350 pickup truck. The prices for those, for the 1988, we received a high bid of $2,600. For the 97, we received a high bid of $13,600. And for the 2008, we received a high bid of $1,350. Both the 1988 vehicle and the 1997 vehicle are vehicles that were previously owned by both Rescue Fire Company. One was owned by Rescue Fire Company, one was owned by Progress Fire Company. Those were transferred to us for purposes of making the sales. So any of the proceeds from the sale of those two vehicles would be deposited back into the fire fund, recognizing those were assets of those respective fire companies. And then the 2008 Ford F-350 pickup truck was a vehicle that was used by the Public Works Department, and there was a transition of a newer vehicle from the Parks and Recreation Department to the Public Works Department. So there was an excess vehicle there. So we are recommending acceptance of each of the respective high bids. Each of the bids exceed what we were anticipating from a value perspective.
Move to authorize the sale.
Any questions or comments? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Pass. Thank you. And we have a contract to award.
Right, I'll introduce this, Mr. President, and allow Mr. Grubik and Ms. Burns to make any comments that they may have relative to this. This is a project for Wakefield Road drainage improvements. Again, this was a bid that you had authorized the release of some time ago. We did accept bids. There is a apparent low responsive and responsible bidder, Doley Construction. Contract price is $124,149, which is less than the engineer's cost estimate for the project, which was about $147,000. Again, just for purposes of recollection, this project will be funded utilizing liquid fuels funding. So, Mr. Grubik, I don't know if you have anything additional.
The bids were opened on May 7th, and as Manager Kratzer indicated, the total of 6 bids were submitted via pen bid. There was a discrepancy with the low bid, and based on the recommendation of our office and of the Township Solicitor's Office, we would recommend that the bid be awarded to the second lowest responsible bidder, Doley Construction, in the amount of $124,149. This project is sorely needed as part of the improvement for infrastructure for the township. It was below our estimate, and I would recommend that the contract be awarded in that amount.
So you're satisfied that this meets all the necessary requirements?
It does.
As Mr. Grubik said, our office reviewed and they did not meet the requirements, so therefore it would go to the second lowest bidder, which met all the
Automatically.
requirements.
Right. So we don't have to rebid, we don't have to re-advertise.
No, there's no rebidding, no re-advertising required because of the problem with the low bid. You can certainly take action this evening to award the bid to the second low, the responsible bidder. There's about a $5,300 difference between the two bids.
Certainly. Do I have a motion?
Mr. President, maybe your motion's appropriate first. I have a question.
No, I'm questioning, is there a motion so we can move on for a discussion?
So moved.
Second.
For discussion then.
Yeah, Mr. President, I'm just going to the fact that why this low bidder was rejected, and it's indicating that they failed to submit documentation demonstrating their attempts to solicit work to disadvantaged business enterprises, including the low bidder. Is it that they submitted something that it wasn't adequate, or they didn't submit anything at all?
They didn't submit it at all.
Okay.
So that was one of the criteria that was included in the bid advertisement and in the contract documents, and they completely they were not responsive to that.
Right.
And for that reason, that's why we're recommending the award to the second low bidder.
Okay. Well, hopefully next time they'll know.
Hopefully.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Comments, concerns from the board? We've had a motion, we've had a second, we've had discussion. On favor?
Aye.
Any objection? Motion passes. Ordinances, resolutions, subdivisions, and land development plans. We have ordinance 1903 to place a stop sign on Wilhelm Road for northbound traffic at the intersection with Harwood Road, and repealing Township Ordinance 1804. Mr. Manager?
Yeah, again, this is an item that was discussed at prior meetings. The ordinance is reflective of the recommendations of the traffic study that the board had accepted at a prior meeting. So we would recommend, if you're so inclined, to proceed with this matter.
Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Comments?
Yes, Mr. President, just this is in my ward. It's on my street, in fact. I want to thank the manager and the highway superintendent for joining me at this site and kind of analyzing the area, and the police for having studied it as well. What we've done is we recently added a stop sign at the end of Harwood, and we found that it didn't really address the problem at the intersection. So what we've done is suggested moving the stop sign to the end of Wilhelm where it intersects Harwood instead. The reason being there's a hill there that's kind of a blind intersection. So I think this is a safer alternative, and I ask the support of the commissioners.
Any further questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Pass. Number 2, County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania request to, I'm sorry. Jump right in. I missed you.
We have two real quick site improvement reductions. The township engineer reviewed both and recommended approval. The first is county commissioners requesting a reduction from $4,356 down to $0.
So moved.
Second. Mr. Grubik, any comment? Is this standard?
No comment. The project is completely finished, and we had satisfactorily finished, and we're recommending that the improvement guarantee be completely released.
Any further comment? Any questions? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Pass.
Second is PSCCU requesting a reduction from $78,234 down to zero.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Grubik.
Again, the project was satisfactorily completed in accordance with the approved plan. It was a minor addition to the PSECU building on Elmerton Avenue, and we would recommend that the improvement guarantee be completely released.
Any comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Objections? Pass.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, do we have any notable unfinished business?
There is nothing to report, Mr. President.
Reports, traffic studies.
There is no traffic studies to report this evening, Mr. President.
Chief, any words from the wise?
Yes, sir.
All right, Health Department, Building Inspector, Mr. Engineer, anything else?
Our report is included in your packet, Commissioners. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Seeing none? Counselor, any questions, comments?
Just one notable thing, our report's also included in the packet. We received word from Attorney Lavery that the Engino matter is expected to be dismissed.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fire Marshal?
No report.
No report. I can see you. You're hiding. Yeah, School Board, Mr. Fleming.
Yes, Mr. President. Just one report, one thing. Congratulations to the recent graduates, the class of 2019 from Susquehanna Township High School. They are going off in the world, and hopefully they will do great things. I just wanted to, we spoke about it at our last regular meeting, and just wanted to sort of follow up with the fact that the members of the Board of Commissioners recently met with members of the school board in an effort to, in a recognition that we both share the same borders and largely the same constituency, to discuss ways that our interests align. Obviously, we are a separate political subdivision. We really don't have authority over the matters of the other, but I think our meeting in our meeting we identified some areas, like I say, where our interests align, and places where perhaps we could partner on the township side and the school district side to to help make Susquehanna Township a better place for the residents and the taxpayers. So those conversations will continue. This is not the goal is not for this to be a one-time occurrence. We are trying to continue to build our partnership with our colleagues who serve on the board of directors, and I was particularly pleased to see some members who were recently elected join the meeting as well. So we've started the work of building that relationship with some of the folks who will be joining the school board here in December. So really positive, good start, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue with them. That concludes my report.
Yeah, that's well put.
Thank you.
Well said. Yeah, thank you. I have no report from the authority. Mr. Napper, any thoughts?
sir.
Mr. Manager, any thoughts from the authority? Any worthy news?
No, just a note, and Commissioner Pine had mentioned this. There was this week, there was a public meeting for the property owners that are impacted by the proposed Southeastern Sanitary Sewer Extension Project in Ward 5. The meeting was well attended, and was some, I think it was a good meeting. I think it was a very productive meeting. Just to note, for purposes of the public and for any commissioners that may be interested, there is a bit of information that's been posted on the township website relative to the project. The presentation that was offered by the consulting engineer for the authority is on the website, as is the preliminary design drawings. So folks that are impacted by that project or have an interest in that project would have the ability to visit the township website to obtain that information. So that's all I would have to add, Mr. President.
Very good, thank you. Indian Wheels, questions, comments?
No, Mr. President, but I do have something for Shade Tree, if I may.
Certainly.
There's still a vacancy for a volunteer on the Shade Tree Commission. The commission meets the third Thursday of each month at 4 p.m. Meetings generally last 30 minutes to an hour. They plan a fall planting of trees, of course, and review permits to plant and remove trees. And the only requirements for a member of the commission would be to be a township resident, of course, and have an interest in protecting and expanding our tree canopy. So if you're interested in serving on the Shade Tree Commission, please contact the township office. That concludes my report.
Mrs. Logan, I think I have a question. This is out of the blue. You don't have to have the answer. This was some months ago. I thought I'd seen on the township website a green tree map where neighbors could map their trees in their backyard.
We do have the ability to.
Betsy, if you would come up just for.
I think about a year ago in our newsletter, we showed that we do have access to PA Tree Map. It isn't something that just any resident can map. You have to be members of the Shade Tree are allowed you logged in. It's an app that you download, and then you take pictures and kind of go through the process of what that tree is, age, that type of thing. So if you're interested in serving on the Shade Tree Commission, or if you're just interested, you have a background, then you can talk to the township and we can give you the information to access it, but it's just not you still have to have a password, so we don't have
Sure.
it just open.
So it's a social network for tree lovers.
It is, yeah. It's handled by the state, and they sponsor it for all of Pennsylvania.
Good.
You can also map stormwater management facilities on there, and it provides you a calculation of how many, our carbon footprint and what we're saving on emissions by
Right.
planting trees.
So it could connect neighbors with each other, and they could compare notes and.
Yep.
Okay. People who have green thumbs.
Yes.
Great.
So I will put something on the website about it, though, because I don't think we do have anything on there.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I was just going to say, yet another good reason to join the Shade Tree Commission. You
go.
can map trees.
Yeah. You like GIS mapping, right?
Thank you. Communications, Mr. Pine.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Well, I think we just covered community outreach, talking about trees. Mr. Spriggs, thank you for those photographs. The township highway equipment is being put to very good use. Thank you. Glad to see it. Human Relations Commission, any news?
No report, thank you.
Thank you. Anything from, sorry, you were just up here. No, okay. And Parks and Recreation, we've talked a lot about that. Is there anything else to address on these topics that we?
Nope.
Very good. All right. Well, we still have vacancies under the rec board. Certainly looking for members of the public of the neighborhoods to throw their hats into the ring. And Human Relations Commission, how many vacancies do we have on that?
We have a single vacancy on that.
Just one.
Yep.
And we don't have any particular expertise requirement to serve on it, do we?
We do not. Just an interest to serve the community.
Sure. And the Shade Tree Commission. So, folks, this is a great opportunity to serve your neighborhoods. Please step forward. We've reached that point in the commissioner comments where it might be a good time to address questions and concerns brought to us by the public. Why don't we start with the Edgemont fire question? And Mr. Manager, or throw this to the Law Bureau. I know we've had a number of discussions with members of the community to talk about the status of the fire company and the social hall.
Sure. And I'll defer on the fire side of the house to Public Safety Director Martin and Fire Marshal Dries. As the President has noted, as it relates to the social hall, nothing has been finalized at this point. However, we are in discussions with a private nonprofit association that's tied to the Edgemont community that may be able to serve the function of continuing to offer that space available for public use. So that conversation is ongoing, again, in the interest of respecting that private nonprofit at this point. I would prefer not to reveal the name, but that those conversations are moving forward. There is a preliminary agreement that Eckert Siemens has worked with us on developing in conjunction with the ward commissioner as well as President Lynch in following up on conversations that we're having with that private nonprofit. So as it relates to that aspect, we're hopeful that we'll have a solution to continue to offer that space for public use. On the fire side of the house, I don't know if there's anything you want to report or.
And I think it's just important to know, Manager Kratzer, that's our desire. Our desire is to continue to have the building function in part as a social gathering place. So the work we are undertaking is with that goal in mind. So just to set everyone's mind at ease.
And the property is owned by the township, correct?
That is correct,
building,
yes.
yeah.
The building was, ownership of the building was transferred as part of a debt transaction that occurred some years ago, yes.
Right.
Well, from a fire perspective, we do not have a fire chief there. We don't have any firefighters there. The fire company per se, from a firefighting perspective, has been out of service for upwards of 2 years in the geographic areas that were covered by the Edgemont Fire Company firefighters has been covered by Progress Fire Company. So there's been no lack of coverage. That's what I can speak to in terms of the firefighting perspective. And I will say that from a police perspective, we have had and still have an ongoing criminal investigation relating to some activities at the fire company. So that's about all I can speak to that because it is ongoing. So we've been managing a lot of different things as it relates to the Edgemont Fire Company. First and foremost has been the fire coverage of your community and the small communities served by what was served by previously the Edgemont Fire Company. Now, from a global perspective, I will share with you that I think that you all understand that the aspect of volunteer fire service, firefighting in 2019, as it relates to the risk, the liability, the training, the required leadership, is daunting. It's not what it was 30 years ago. And, these do provide challenges to us and to, the recruitment of the fire service. We do have 2 active fire companies, Progress 32, which is a full-scale live-in fire company and of volunteers, and also Station 37 that has 2 stations, one behind the municipal building here, as well as one on 6th Street. So everything has been covered. We have spent a lot of time and interest in the Edgemont Fire Company, knowing its tradition and its history, in your great community. And as the commissioner said and Manager Kratzer said, there's things ongoing to ensure that building, as best as possible serves the interests of that community. Hope that at least for tonight answers that question, and I can certainly meet with you personally offline, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Manager. We had 2 other questions addressed to us earlier regarding Mr. Mills and the stormwater runoff. There's a lot to digest on that presentation, and it's news personally to me. Does any commissioner have a comment or question about that?
Question.
I do. Just one issue. I know a young man who lives on the street, and there is Paxton Creek, I believe, that runs behind his house, and I've been out there to see when it rains. He gets a lot of water flow that comes from let me get my bearings here, from the west of St. Margaret Mary. So I'm not sure if there's some kind of swell that runs down that tree line that he was speaking of, that where it might be getting too much water runoff from Paxton Creek. We don't know, but it's something to look into.
Mr. Grubik.
I make a comment just sort of to set the stage, if you will, or at least clarify some issues. The plan for St. Margaret Mary's Church was approved back in 2009. Church was built around 2010 or so. At that time, the land development plan for the church did adhere to all stormwater management criteria that were in the township ordinances at that time. There is a stormwater management plan, and if you look at the first sheet that Mr. Mills had submitted, you can see the church property, the church itself. You can see the driveway that leads up to the center of the church. That rectangular portion over on the right-hand side of the drawing is actually a combination infiltration basin and stormwater detention basin that serves the church. Approximately 99% of the flow from the church parking lot and the building itself is captured through the combination of infiltration and internal piping and is discharged into that combination infiltration and detention basin. The outlet for the detention basin is not connected. There's a head wall and then there's a swale, and that flows into an existing 15-inch culvert under Paxton Church Road, which discharges onto a property to the east or to the right side of Mr. Mills' property. So there is very little water that gets onto Paxton Church Road from the parking lot or the buildings themselves. There is a swale line that, if you look where Paxton Church Road is, basically in a east to west or right to left direction, and you can see the light portion of the paving. You can even see the inlets. There are two storm sewer inlets that pick up the remainder of the flow from the church property, discharge it into a swale, and then into the detention basin. So a huge amount of that water is controlled and discharged off-site beyond Mr. Mills' property. The issue of sanitary sewer is beyond, I think, the purview of the board, because that was something that was done between the church itself and the authority back in 2009. So unfortunately, for Mr. Mills, the sewer line connection goes in the opposite direction of his home. It goes to the southwest as opposed to the east. I can't comment on the issue about the dead trees that are shown by the red X's, but I was out there this morning, since it was a wet morning, and took some photos, which I sent to Mr. Kratzer, and he in turn sent to the board. There is a very significant crown to Paxton Church Road that basically is allowing the water to be contained on the north shoulder, which is on the church side, and then discharging to the east to that 15-inch culvert that I previously mentioned that the detention basin flows into. So the other photos that Mr. Mills had indicated on the bottom of what he has is page 1, where it says eastern view of waterline connection location and surface water. I don't know when in 2017 that was taken, but this morning there was very little water that was along that shoulder, and it was flowing in an easterly direction. Same thing on sheet number 2 or page number 2 of the photos. There is a little bit of standing water shown on figure 3. He shows the removal or the places where the trees were, and on figure 4. Again, you can see the crown in the road on figure 4 that identifies the fact that very little, if any, of that water, unless we have a deluge, crosses over Paxton Church Road onto his property. His property does sit, it's low-lying. It sits probably 1.5 feet or so below the elevation of Paxton Church Road. In reviewing, I brought the plan along for the church, but in reviewing the stormwater calculations based on the approved land development plan, the post-development flow, the flow that occurs right now after the church property has been built and occupied, is about 50% of what it was in the pre-development condition. So there's a significant reduction in flow runoff coming from that property. I think if I understood Mr. Mills' presentation, his biggest concern related to the condition of his septic system and what if anything could be done to alleviate any of the problems that may occur. Evidently, he's not having a problem now, but he could be having a problem. But I don't think that any problem that he would have on the septic system is or was created by any of the runoff from the church.
Thank you.
Mr. Engineer, just a question. It seemed as though Mr. Mills was claiming that the pooling of the water on the north side of the road could be going into the ground and then causing a problem on his side of the street underground. I mean, does that seem?
It could be, but from all of our observations over the years, there's a very direct flow from the main driveway of the church in an easterly direction to the existing culvert.
Okay.
So there could be some standing water that could be infiltrating into the ground, but most of it does, in fact, flow to the east and is drained away from the site. And as I mentioned before, the outlet from the detention basin does discharge to a culvert under Paxton Church Road, which discharges down through a property to the east or to the right-hand side on this drawing of Mr. Mills' property.
So you're saying the design moves the water away and around his property?
That would be correct.
Mr. Grubik, I have a couple questions, if I may. In Figure 2, there's clearly ponding of water there, and irregardless of whether it goes onto his property or not, I'm just looking at the ponding of water. And I know you said that the builder met with the stormwater management requirements at the time of building. But if memory serves, they put in that walking path after they built. So would that have any impact on the runoff there? Because the water ponding there seems to be between the walking path and the road.
I think that ponding water that you're looking at in Figure 1, Commissioner, is...
Figure 2.
Well, Figure 2 looks to be after a very heavy rain, and all of the water basically is on the church side.
Right, I'm not talking about it going onto
walking-
his property. I'm just saying this is an issue. I mean, it's on the road too. That's a township issue. I'm not saying it's
Right.
impacting Mr. Mills' property, but I'm looking at this photo and I'm wondering if the walking path, which was put in after they met the stormwater requirements, could be causing this water, something's causing that water to pond there.
The walking path it would present a negligible increase in runoff on that property. It's 6 feet wide. And I believe Figure 2, it relates to, according to Mr. Mills' presentation, that eastern view of waterline connection location and surface water. That was back in 2017 when the connection was made by Suez to service the Stray Winds Farm property in Lower Paxton Township.
Right.
But you can see that the water that's ponding almost to the center line of the road is totally within the roadway and does not cross over the center line of the road, which is indicative of the statement I made earlier about the crown existing in the road, keeping the water on the north side or the church side of the property.
So what would be causing that water to pool there?
I think there probably could be a little bit more maintenance of the swale on the church property. That it seems to meet, it needs mowed. I just noticed that this morning. But also, if there is some settlement that, as Mr. Mills has indicated, that could be easily fixed by some regrading of the base of that swale to keep the water moving in an easterly direction.
Who is responsible for that? Is that private property?
Yes, it is. And the church is responsible for maintaining the swale, all of the stormwater collection system within the church property, and the detention basin.
Yeah, that's Seems like an unsafe condition on the roadway. Now, that could have been a very heavy rainfall. I mean,
I don't know that 2017. I don't know when it was taken.
Yeah.
About how much.
and I
rain.
mean, sometimes
It
there's
could have been
just nothing you can do,
Correct.
given the amount of rainfall.
Correct.
But
And I drive down this road a lot, and sometimes you do see standing water right there in that area that they show. The same takes place in front of Apple Creek, where they made that turn off there, where you can turn into Apple
Yes,
Creek.
Paxton Church,
Paxton Church Road.
north side. There's a
Yep.
there's a flat spot in there
Yes, sir.
that's existed prior to Apple Creek.
Yeah.
So-
And once they put that right turn into Apple Creek, you get standing water there. Now, you gotta remember, these are old farm roads, and we went out and did all this building around it, but didn't correct the road.
And the reason I ask about this is not because of, the relevance to Mr. Mills' property, because you say it's not relevant, which I accept that, but the fact that there's standing water on the road, and if that occurs and Commissioner Napper says he sees it, I've gotten complaints from residents in the past, not about this particular area, but probably the area you're talking about, when we have winter weather and the temperatures fluctuate, and then there's icy patches on the road from the standing water. That's the reason I was asking about it.
But there is positive drainage from the driveway, the main driveway going into the church to the east. So the problem could be fixed. The grades are relatively flat, but at least they're heading in the right direction.
What action, if any, do you recommend the township should take? Send a letter to the church?
I would recommend two things. One, that a letter be sent to the church indicating that Mr. Mills had come in and expressed a concern regarding the drainage issues, and also to ask them to maintain the swale that they are compelled to by their approved plan to maintain. Correct, if possible.
Is that the will of the board?
Yes.
We have a consensus on that? Certainly.
I move that
And
we
the second,
should do that,
sorry.
yeah.
And the second item that I would recommend would be to take a look at the feasibility of installing an inlet at the east of the intersection of Paxton Church and the main entrance to St. Margaret Mary's Church, to see, and it doesn't have to, we're not talking about a lot of water, but the water does pond there when there's a heavy rainfall event, to determine the feasibility of draining that part of the road to the east to intersect with the culvert that goes under Paxton Church.
That would come with some cost.
It would,
To the township.
yes.
Could you prepare an estimate and provide that to Mr. Kratzer for a future discussion?
Be happy to.
Thank you. And that is if that's the will of the board. Yes?
Yes,
an estimate, sure.
Yes. Do we need a vote?
No, I don't think we need to vote.
And I think if some of this standing water could be alleviated here on the church's part, even if it isn't impacting Mr. Mills' property, it could assuage some of his fears.
Sure.
He said he's been, contacting us about this for years, and not that it's our responsibility, but if we can facilitate something to prevent this from happening, might give him some sense of result.
Seems like this is further support for the concept of stormwater management fees.
Wow.
Just as a note.
Yeah.
Right?
On that church parking lot there, yeah.
Motion to adjourn?
No, not yet.
All right.
That big old
Counselor, would you, Counselor, would you prepare a draft of the letter?
Sure.
Thank you. Let's see, what else?
Report of
Oh,
bills
and
payable.
Mr. Minor had some questions about drainage on Green Road, Green Street?
Green Street.
Green Street.
Yes.
Mr. Grubik.
Long history, as you know, with the Uptown Drainage project, and it is coming to an end, thankfully. Commissioner Varchek is as glad as the rest of us are. There are issues related to this area of the township, especially on Green Street, is extremely flat. The grades are extremely flat in that area. And the inlet, it's not a fact of the inlet being too high, it's the fact of the flat grades causing a very slow flow of the gutter flow into the inlet. The inlet does drain, but it does not drain as quickly as one may expect or desire. So that's that's one fact. The other fact is, with regard to the paving issue, what was identified in some of Mr. Minor's photos related to the paving of the waterline trench, which has not yet been done. It's not been restored yet. So there is some additional paving work that is going to be done by the contractor for Suez in that area that will be able to help the situation. The grades, again, are very, very flat, and I'm talking about half of an inch, 3/4 of an inch grade from inlet to inlet. And in order to fix the problem, again, it would be extremely expensive to redo anything. But there was an inlet placed in there, and like I said, it does drain. However, it does not drain as quickly as other inlets in the area. So that's where we are now. And our inspectors have been working with the contractor. We're getting to the end of the line with regard to the work with Dolly. And moving forward, I would hope that the contractor for the water company would get in at the appropriate time, consistent with Dolly's completion of the work, and get everything fixed up.
Mr. Grubik, can your organization find out when Suez plans to come do that
Yes,
work? Because
we have
I
that
don't
on-
see them anywhere else in the
we have
community.
that on the list.
And we can communicate that to Mr. Minor,
Yes.
so,
We have that on the list, Commissioner.
thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Someone needs to move to pay the bills. Do I have a motion to pay the bills in the amount of $1,655,637.35?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're out of here.